you going to sit? Or?
No, I'm just sitting for right now.
Oh, okay, cool. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because I can change the.
No, it's okay.
Okay, cool.
I'll stand that way around.
Okay, so for the first time in this entire class, like, I get to take a smoke break, and you guys don't. So I'm going to let Angel get started. I'll be back in a sec. Yeah, if you just stand more or less here, then it'll catch you, and
Okay.
we're good. Thank you so much for talking to the class.
Sure.
Okay, I will be back in very shortly. It's all yours.
Okay. Are you guys ready? Do you need a few more minutes? Okay. Good morning. Hello, Bakersfield.
Hello.
So my name is Angel Cottrell, and currently I am the Outreach and Public Affairs Coordinator for the School of Business and Public Administration, and I'm also a consultant with the Small Business Development Center that the School of Business and Public Administration hosts. So let's see, who do we have in the room? Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Valerie.
Hi, Valerie. Okay, perfect. I know who you are. Thomas Protho. All right, sir.
Jacob Wood.
Hi, Jacob. Okay. Melissa.
Hi, Dora.
Melissa.
Yes, Julia.
Hi, Julia. I'm Angel. We've done a lot of emailing back and forth. There's a shake across the room to you. I'm glad that you're here. Okay, you are?
Louis.
Hi, Louie. And you're Serena. There's Miss Serena. Here we go. Okay, who's in Bakersfield?
Hi, Angel. This is MG.
Hi, MG. How are you?
This is Khalid.
Hi, Khalid. Who else do I have?
Ray.
Ray.
Yeah, we have Theo here.
Hi, Fear. How are you doing?
How are you?
I'm
How
well.
about you?
Good to see you. Who else?
Yeah, great. You.
And Tawana.
Tawana. There you are. And who else? David, Ash. Huh? Is that it?
That's all.
So David and Ashley are not here today? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, well, I'm going to speak with you a little bit about my background, and then I will address all of your questions, and then you can also put me on the spot for any other questions that you would like to ask me as we are discussing things. So, I was born actually in Louisville, Kentucky. I have lived in 6 states and in 9 cities. I came to California in 1986. I moved to Santa Barbara in 89, and I lived there for 20 years. And that's where I opened my first business, and also where I raised my daughter. My daughter will be 23 years old in September, and she just moved out on her own in the last year. Hallelujah! And so I love her dearly, but it's a huge accomplishment for both of us. And I came to Kern County in December of 2009, and for various reasons. So let's talk about my first business, okay? My first business was called Sojourn Services, and this business brought persons with developmental disabilities out of state hospitals and moved them in communities, and I also ran a day program that was licensed both federally and by the state. And so we served medically fragile population along with behaviorally challenged population. This was in my early 20s, and I stayed in this business until my mid-30s. And through that time, within the first 5 years, I grew the revenue portion of my portion of the business. Because let me explain the business. The business had a whole section that was on the adults, which is the whole part that I ended up running, and then we had a whole section that we worked with infants. So we had the spectrums, and the infants were served because infants were starting to be diagnosed with developmental disabilities as well as being dual diagnosed with mental illness. And so we had a whole program that worked with the babies and the families in their homes. everything that I did had everything to do with the adults. And I grew that business to over $2 million in revenue in less than 5 years. And in a nonprofit situation, that's a lot of money. And so I supervised anywhere between 35 and 55 staff at any period of time. The business ran 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And let me stop for a minute. For the folks in Bakersfield, if I start talking too fast because I'm looking at the people here and I'm not used to ITV, just shout out, okay? If you're not getting a good experience, tell me, because I won't know otherwise. And I'll just keep going, okay? Okay, thank you. So, and that business was difficult, to say the least. It was difficult because it was something that never stopped. It was difficult because we were dealing with people's lives every single day, and it was really life or death situations. When you work with people that have behavior challenges, there's a whole different arena that you are stepping into. And so what I did was actually, I got known in the state for taking the toughest of the tough. And I would go into state hospitals. I'll tell you, I've never been to CSU Channel Islands as a university. I went there when it was Camarillo State Hospital. Okay, and I took about 7 people out of there. I took people out of Fairview Developmental Center, which is down in Costa Mesa. I took people out of Porterville. I didn't take too many out of Atascadero. Where was the other one that I went to? There was one more that I was in and out of. And then there was other institutions in the Santa Barbara area. Grew that program, built out a management team that I had over 7 managers over different departments. So I grew the business from within. One of the things that I'm very proud of with that business is actually I had a couple of staff leave toward the end of my tenure, and they opened their own business, and they're still in business to this day. So I had a question from Jacob about, in your career, what do you feel is your biggest accomplishment? Well, I've got different accomplishments across different areas of my career, but I will say one of the most important things to me is that in every place that I have worked or I have built, I have had staff that continue to reach out to me, not all the time, but out of the blue. I'll get a text or a phone call, and they'll want to discuss what's going on in that business or where they're working now. And that is something that I have huge amount of pride in and a huge amount of accomplishment in, because when you have an opportunity, when you're put into a leadership role and you have an opportunity to develop people, you all know what the tenet of a good leader is, that you create more good leaders. So that is something that I carry with me and something that I'm very, very proud of. And I think that that's really important, because then you know what you're doing is not just about serving yourself. That's truly about service leadership. So I stayed with Sojourn Services until my mid-30s. When I turned 30, I decided to start going back to school because I was a dropout. So I had gone to school in Santa Barbara in 1989, and within 3 years I was married and had a kid. And I dropped out, and I was a single mom, and in that time was when, well, I got married, and I tell the joke that I got divorced faster. So I raised my daughter as a single mom in Santa Barbara and had this business going at the same time. And when I hit about 30, that was when I really had a thorn in my side, and that was the fact I had not completed my education. And I'm one of those people that when I start something, I finish it. And so I started putting myself back to school at Santa Barbara City College to take math classes and things like that, because it had been a while since I had been a student. And then I got back into UC Santa Barbara, and I had a horrible GPA and minus grade points, and I had this counselor at UCSB that told me that they would never let me back in because I had done so horribly, and I took that as one of my greatest challenges in my life, and I had to actually pay for my classes in summers at $400 and something a unit with no financial aid, and in the midst of, and get particular grades to be able to get back enrolled, and in the midst of that I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that is an insulin-dependent diabetic. They used to call that juvenile diabetes. Well, I was 33. I wasn't that much of a juvenile at that time. And it was weird because I was in class and I kept not being able to see the board, and I thought something was wrong with my glasses, and I was so thirsty. So anyway, I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. That did not stop me from continuing my education. I got into UCSB. I only had to complete 4 quarters. And 3 out of the 4 quarters, I was 4.0 with Dean's Honors List. And the best part was that I ran into that counselor on campus. And I marched right up to him. And I said, I want to thank you for telling me that you'd never let me back in. Here's my perm number, 1756212. I will never forget that. Why don't you check me out now? I'm on Dean's Honors List. So I just want to thank you so much for saying that I couldn't do this. And once I graduated, I got my undergraduate degree. I finished it up in sociology. And then within 6 months, I was in my master's program at Antioch University, and I got my master's degree in organizational management. And in between that time of leaving Sojourn, so in the midst of doing my education, I left my business. Excuse me. It was not a happy separation. It was a very difficult separation. But there were things that were going on in that business that I could not support. And the woman that we had brought in as the CEO, there was four of us women that originally opened this business. And at that time, and this was back in the early 2000s, there was a lot happening in the budget of the state of California. And what was happening is that the clients were being used to try to get money. And what happened was that the woman that was our CEO, and you have to understand that many of these clients I had worked with for more than 10 years. Some of them I had worked with when I had worked at institutions in Santa Barbara. I had brought them directly from those institutions. So they had been with me for more than 10 years. I had staff that had been with me for more than 10 years that followed me from agency to agency until we opened Sojourn. And so what Sharon was deciding to do was, in order to, because we were having trouble in negotiations with the regional center, so there's 21 regional centers in the state of California that take care of this kind of stuff, and that's where you do your negotiations as a vendor for your contracts. And so what she decided to do and what she wanted me to do was put a 30-day notice on all my clients unless the parents came up with money. Extortion. I left. I did not see any of my staff or any of my clients for a minimum of 18 months. The regional center actually contacted me at home 10 months after I left to see if I would be willing to become what's called vendorized and open a corporation myself and retake on the company that I built. And I had to tell them no. And it was very, very difficult. But it was something that I had to stand up for. And what happened was that she lost the business within 1 year of me leaving. The whole thing went down the tubes. Sojourn was up to over $5 million a year annually. Staff that I had that were been there stayed there. The rumors that I heard was that everybody got a payout. She had to pay people out. And majority of the clients that I had brought out of the state hospitals actually went to that company of staff members that had worked for me, and they went to them. And many of the staff that had worked for me went and worked for that company. So it ended up working out for people. Within about 3 to 4 years, about 70% of the people that worked in our business, within our business, had left the industry and had moved on to another industry. So that was a very tough situation to go through. I was very lucky to be at that point of working on my education so that I had something else to focus on. And I had decided, because I had been I started working when I was 15, but I had been extremely career driven from the time that I was 19 when I had started in this industry, opened the business at 24. My daughter was 14 months old when I opened the business. And so by the time that I got into my mid-30s, I had really done a good job of learning how to give out to others. And I had not done a good job of learning how to actually put anything back into me. And due to that, I wasn't very functional anymore at that point in time. And so I had to take some time off, and that's when I focused on school. And that's one of the reasons why I've got $90,000 in student loans. So I took a period of time where I worked very little. I didn't look for anything what I consider to be career-oriented. I looked for more jobs. And I started really focusing in on my education, which was at least making me feel better about something. I was doing something to try to create some change. And as I started to heal from that process and started to sort of get my energy back in that, I went to work for this engineering company, Friedman Research Corporation, and so this was a job I took. It wasn't career-oriented. I purposely took a job because I thought that would be easier. No. not when you have management and leadership like ingrained in your body. Working at that, it can be very difficult. But it was interesting. I learned a lot. I can tell you all about A-frames in vehicles and the reasons why rollovers happen and why vehicles crash and all this other good stuff. And I worked with this engineer guy that was brilliant, total jerk, but brilliant. And this other team of like 8 engineers. And what we did was they were trial experts. And so this was the time when you go into the case rooms and all the boxes in the case rooms were all Ford and GM and Chevy. You saw hardly anything from import cars because this was back in the day when the Explorers and the Expeditions and all these cars were coming about, all these SUVs. Well, the way that they built them, and they built the A-frames on these things, besides them being top-heavy, they didn't build them with the amount of steel that needed to be built. So these cars, when people would overcorrect, would completely roll over, smash, and were constantly killing people. So this actually, if you've known that Ford Motor Company has actually changed the way in which they make their vehicles, it has to do with a lot of these lawsuits going on, and I worked for one of the trial experts that just took Ford for all they had. I mean, these guys, it was amazing. So it was interesting, and I lasted there for a little more than a year, and I had enough of all the trial prep stuff, and I was really, I was in my first year of graduate school, and so then I decided I wanted to do something else. Oh, and in between that time, I had done some consulting with some Pilates studios and some different places of that in Santa Barbara before I had done that. So I was still working part-time when I was finishing up my undergraduate. And then I went and I sold office furniture for 10 weeks. Green office furniture. And I sold $90,000 of office furniture in 10 weeks. And in that time was when I saw the job for Women's Economic Ventures. And it took about 2.5, 3 months of interviewing to get that job. And this was one of those things that I had read this job description. It was called Client Services Director, which doesn't really explain what the job was. The job was more of a COO position for this company. And at that time, the company had been around about 14, 15 years. It was started by a woman named Marcia Bailey. And it was started in 1990, 1991. And it was a company that ran what's called a Women Business Center through the U.S. Small Business Administration, and it helped women start and grow their businesses. And yes, did we serve men also? Absolutely. And any men that had their cojones that could stand up and walk into Women's Economic Ventures and said that they needed help with their business were welcome. And over time, we got more of them. I can't even tell you the amount of men that would walk in and be like, so, well, you don't work with us? So I'll tell you about some of my stories with that I used, because when I opened this company up in the mountains in southern Kern County, I'll tell you about some of that experience here in a few minutes of when I start to come to Kern. And Women's Economic Ventures had a education, consulting, training aspect, and also is a micro-enterprise lender. Who knows what a micro-enterprise lender is? A micro-enterprise lender is what's considered alternative financing. A micro-enterprise is a business that has 5 or fewer employees. 82% of all net jobs in this country since 1983 have been created by businesses of 5 or fewer employees. Go to the U.S. Small Business Administration to see that data. If you want to see the report that I have on that, I'll send it to you. Okay? So what we did is this business was in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. I started working there January 7th, 2008, and stayed there and grew Kern out of there. So what happened with Weave, and that's the short version of Women's Economic Ventures. So when I showed up over there, its main program was a 14-week business planning and training program that they offered at 6 different places regionally, from Santa Maria down to Thousand Oaks, twice a year. When I left and I exited that business, they had 4 programs running. One's called Thrive in 5, one's called Business Plan Intensive, one's called Set to Launch, and they still have SET, which is self-employment training, and now they're up to 17 staff. There was 10 staff when I was there. The business itself was bringing in about $1.1 million in revenue, and it had various ways of bringing in revenue. You had corporations, you had foundations, you had government grants, and then you had my all-time favorite, which is what's called earned income. Now, nobody really needs to see this. I'm just putting it down so I remember to talk about it all. Now, in this particular nonprofit, we were doing pretty good on court, foundation, and grants. Earned income was really low. So out of the $1.1 million, the earned income was about $67,000 a year. When I exited, the line item in the budget was $185,000 a year. Where does earned income come from?
Fees?
People, your clients, okay? Now, when I started working in this business, and yes, it was all women, and no, it was not super crazy, because the one that was super crazy, the culture pushed out. We can talk about that, okay? When I started working in this business, I started really getting pushback from the staff, because a nonprofit corporation is a business. And if you do not bring in revenue, and you do not earn a profit, you will not be in business. And there is a misconception about nonprofits. First of all, people think that everything's supposed to be free. Second of all, everyone that works at a nonprofit isn't supposed to make any money. Otherwise, you don't care. All of that is BS. And it doesn't work. And it particularly doesn't work in the time and day of now. Okay? And so I started really getting pushback from all the staff. My staff were young. We would call them millennials. And my staff would come to me and say, you know, all you do is think about money and think about this all the time. And our clients need us. And I said, you know, you're absolutely right, your clients. All of our clients need us. Everybody that walks through this door has a story. And let me tell you something. In 2008 and 2009, who do you think was coming through our doors to try to get loans? Everyone. Anybody remember the bottom of the economy falling out? We had people that never thought that they'd have to walk into a place like Weave. Okay? The bottom line is that I had to work with the staff and say to them, if we don't get to a place that we can show value from our actual customer, we have no reason for existing. Nonprofits are opened because you see a need. And then you provide a solution. But if you can't figure out how to be in business yourself, you've got a problem. And if you are in the business of teaching people how to be in business, and you do not follow those rules yourself, and you do not make those hard decisions yourself, what are you doing? So it took me about 6 weeks of meetings, because what they had done is, the original class we had was $2,500 a person. And what we did was we raised money to seal the gap for people. They were on a sliding scale. Well, the scale started at $50. They hadn't changed the scale since 1991. This is 2008. So what happened was, over a series of 4 months, I had meetings with their staff. And what ended up happening from that was that they chose what the new sliding scale was. Now, somebody tell me, why was it important? And it went to $200 was the bottom. And it's still at that point. Tell me why I needed the staff to come up with this number.
They have to have buy-in.
Thank you. Because, why do they have to have buy-in?
Otherwise, they're not going to support it.
That's right, because.
Because it's not their idea.
And because they don't own it. And because if they don't feel inside when those people walk through the door and they do not believe that this has that value, we're never going to close a sale. Who thinks about nonprofits of having a sales component? I do. Your services are your product. What you give and how you close the gap in a community is your product. And if you don't have people that buy into that, you have no reason to exist, no matter how important you think the need is that you're trying to fill. So, I know I've got to go faster here. Not that I have trouble talking fast, but I'm like looking at the time, and I do want to get to your questions. Anyway, I'll tell you one more story about that business real quick. 2009, bottom's falling out of the economy. Nobody can get any loans for money. Main Street is dying. So what we did is we took the 14-week self-employment training class. I worked with a team, and we compressed the curriculum into 7 weeks to create what's called the Business Plan Intensive. The Business Plan Intensive was for existing business owners or high-level professionals, so for example, an attorney, that either did not have a business plan or had a business plan that they needed to shore up and needed a loan and a capital at the same amount of time. So what I had happen was created this curriculum, which we had, and I've got my Babson College pen here, which is one of the top colleges of entrepreneurship. Candida Brush actually peer-reviewed this curriculum for us. I had people all across the country peer-review this curriculum. We launched this class, and at the same time, every business owner that was in this class was also launched into the Small Business Loan Fund, our microenterprise loan. Within 100 days of launching that program, I had funded 5 businesses over $50,000, and they all had business plans within 100 days. That program still runs to this day. So they have the self-employment training, they have the business plan intensive, and then I designed a case management program called Thrive in 5. That's a program that brings business owners in from 2 to 5 years to try to get them to $1 million in revenue. They've already had 3 businesses do that. The program launched in 2010 as a pilot, became official in 2011. They've trademarked the name. This particular type of consulting actually mirrored a lot of what I did at Sojourn Services. When I was at Sojourn Services with my clients, if you can imagine, when they came out of state hospitals, they were on 15 drugs and all this other kind of stuff, and we're used to hands-on, meaning people would put them in basket holds, people would do things like that in order to deal with their behavior. We completely changed the way that we worked with them. We had a very hands-off approach. You learn how to duck and weave, let me tell you. You do stop yourself from getting hit. But what I did was I created what was called a circle the wagons approach, where I brought in the psychopharmacologists, the parents, from their jobs, from whoever was on the team to bring them in to do this case management. This is what I did with businesses with Thrive in 5. I talk to you about this because in the times of your career that you're doing different things, understand that there will be times that you take that knowledge and those skills and you get to apply them in other places of your career throughout your life. You don't just, and it's taken me time. I just turned 45 about 3 weeks ago. And I can honestly say that I've been in management for 25 years, and I've been working for 30. And I can tell you that I'm at a point in my career where I have enough time and I've done many different things where I'm starting to have a true reflection period on what it is that I do, what do I enjoy doing, and what do I want to do more of. And it's being able to reflect back on some of these things and being able to see that, oh, this is similar to this. This approach doesn't have to be just with people with developmental disabilities. I use this approach over here. I can use this over here. None of it's the same. But it takes elements of those pieces, and then I'm able to use that knowledge and those skills in order to drive things forward. I'm a builder. That's what I've learned about me. I'm a builder. I go into places, I assess what's happening, and then I start building programs around it. And I start building things out that start to make things function better. And I'm still trying to figure out, how do I write that for my LinkedIn? How do I start to actually communicate this? Because I'm just at a place in my life right now that I'm starting to recognize that this is what I do. Because I've got different places now, completely, totally polar opposite types of businesses, types of work, and yet these skills keep showing up. And it's hard to recognize those things about yourself. But I do think it's important as you're going through your career to actually take the time. So in the midst of Women's Economic Ventures, I ended up coming to Kern County. I ended up opening a small business development center in the southern Kern Mountains, as well as continuing to work at Women's Economic Ventures. I commuted 165 miles one way for over 2 years, getting my daughter to be a senior in high school, finish up her year, and I did that, and I opened an SBDC at the same time. What I didn't know was that when I was opening my SBDC, there were representatives from Kern County and CSUB at my grand opening because they were trying to open their SBDC, and I had no idea. They just didn't know who this person was was that was in the Southern Kerr Mountains that was opening a small business development center. Who is this person? Dr. Mark Evans, who's the department chair of economics, was there. Richard Chapman, who's the president of Kern Economic Development Corporation, was there. I had no idea who these people were. I just had a place that was standing room only on the mountains where I had seen all these mom and pop businesses, and I was like, this is Weave. This is Weave. This is what we do. I continued in that business. And what happened was that the economy still kept being tight. And I had decided to start to reduce some of my workload. And so I let go of all of my duties in Santa Barbara and Ventura County and basically resigned from my position and just stayed with SBDC part-time. And then in the midst of that, we had an allocation change from the Small Business Administration, and basically the writing was on the wall. And if I needed about $250,000 to launch Weave in Kern. And not that Kern doesn't need a Women's Economic Ventures, it does. But at that time, I wasn't going to be able to make that happen. So it took 4 months of conversations with the CEO, Marcia Bailey, for her to lay me off. I wrote the plan to lay me off. I wrote the plan to close Kern. And why did I do that? Because I can't be in the business of teaching people how to be in business if I don't actually follow the rules of business itself. And Weave was doing too well in Santa Barbara and Ventura County to have an appendage off of it that was just sucking resources out of it and not able to put resources back in. So I lost my job. I wrote myself out of a job. One of the most letters of recommendation that I'm most proud of in my life is the one that Marcia wrote about me. She said she never met someone in her life ever before that truly put the organization's needs ahead of the personal needs. And that I had some of the highest business ethics that she'd ever seen. And I keep that with me, particularly in the hard times. Was I scared? Absolutely. I had moved from Santa Barbara and left there. And when you leave Santa Barbara, it's very hard to go back. You can't afford it. And so I had to start new. And I started doing some consulting with the SBDC that opened at CSU Bakersfield, and then this job opened up at the School of Business, the Outreach Coordinator, which is now the Outreach and Public Affairs Coordinator. This job did not exist before me. I have been building this job out now. It will be 3 years on July the 1st. I added a whole bunch of stuff into the LinkedIn yesterday to talk about this because the job is building and growing. And basically, I do a lot of different things with it, but what I'm trying to do is increase both internal and external communication and connection between stakeholders, as well as then increasing our recruiting, increasing our credibility, increasing our exposure, increasing people's commitment, and tying this into curriculum. So I've been doing this now for about 3 years. The job is expanding. I am finally getting some good traction within the school and outside of the school. As you can imagine, this is what's called a change agent job. So it has been extremely difficult. Anybody that tells you that wants change is halfway telling the truth and halfway lying. They're telling the truth because they know they need to change something. When it comes down to actually implementing that, that's when it becomes difficult. And that's really what I face. And a lot of it becomes, how do I actually work with all these different types of stakeholders that I have, and how do I work with all these different agendas that I don't know always exist? And sometimes I learn about those agendas when I step somewhere wrong. I've changed the way that I have awareness. It reminds me sometimes of back in the day when I did work with people with developmental disabilities, because I would teach my staff, you listen with every sense but your ears. You listen to your ears last. Because when you got someone with autism that's having a perseveration problem, meaning they're saying the same thing over and over and over and over again, that is something that's going on with their autism. That does not mean that's something that they want. That's why they'll knock your block off when you actually try to do that. So I had to teach people, start paying attention What's going on everywhere else in the environment? How can we figure out these triggers? And that's some of what I do in the School of Business. As I start paying attention to everything else that's going on around me. Not that I don't listen, but so I can actually really hone in on what's happening. Because if I cannot get people to actually buy in, and I cannot get people to start to own some of this, it doesn't matter. Okay? And there's going to be times that I move forward with it, and I'll go 5 steps forward, and then it'll be 3 steps back. And does that get frustrating? Absolutely. But at the same time, when you start to see that you are making a difference in areas, you keep going. Okay. Now, I haven't directly answered all of your questions, but I think I'm kind of moving around sort of what it is that you want to learn about. So let's see here.
I think the idea of treating academics and bureaucrats like people who have autism is a bit insightful.
Well, I don't know if I would make the direct connection that I would ever even say to anyone that I'm doing that. It's not so much of treating them like they have autism. It's more about understanding what's happening in the environment that you're in.
Yeah.
And with people with autism, we had to pay attention to what was going in the environment, or there was no possible way for me to actually help them help themselves. And what actually drove them to be better or to put them at peace. And when you're dealing with academics and bureaucrats, what you have to start to really figure out is what is important to them and why. And it may not make a whole lot of sense, but you have to be able to look at what's going on outside and around you as well to understand how those things are actually affecting. And there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes than what you realize. And I will say that this job has been one of the harder jobs that I've ever had. Not because the work is necessarily hard. It's because the place is hard. It's because the people can be hard. It's because the culture can be hard and can be difficult. And the pace. You know, when you come from private sector into academia, there's a very, very different pace. Hello, Dr. Way. There's a very different pace that happens. And that's been one of the biggest challenges that I've had, is really taking patience pills and really learning how to actually slow down and not always be attached to outcomes occurring and results happening in the timing that I think that they should happen. And I actually had that happen this week in a meeting. We've been working on this strategic plan, wrapping some things up and really putting some new goals in for the school. And we had 3 or 4 meetings over the course of the past 6 weeks. So we've been hitting it hard. There's a committee of 12 of us, and we've been hitting this puppy hard. And we were to meet, I think it was Wednesday morning. Yeah, Wednesday morning. And we were literally down to finishing up just the last few things on some goals. And at about 9:30 that night, an email came through from one of our community advisors, very well-respected man. I have a ton of respect for him. But he basically turned the whole meeting on its head. He changed all of this form because he's very much into how the balanced scorecard formatting. And we literally, in that meeting, we lost traction now. And there were times in that meeting where I had, as one of my colleagues said, spontaneous irritation, which I actually kind of thought that was funny. And it was very true. And I had to actually, ruminate on this for the past 48 hours and go back and talk to Dr. Stark about it and say, okay, so here's my part in this. I needed to let go of the outcome. I wasn't there yet. We were right at that point, and then at 9:30 at night, all your work that you've been working on for 6 weeks just...
Cool.
And I was not ready. I was still committed to getting that done. We've got a different plan in place. I'll be working with some people on this on Monday. We're going to get some things done, but not what we thought we were going to get done. And that's part of, one of the questions was, how challenging is this job? Well, these are the parts that become challenging. Because I'll tell you that in the private sector, if you do not stay on within the deadlines that you are setting for that business, you have a very, very different outcome than you do an academic. In an academic and in a university setting, it is taken for granted that you have revenue. Okay? Because those students continue to come in. And you know that there's funding that's coming in. So you're not always necessarily thinking about the fact that you have a job to do to actually bring that in. Those things are very much separated from the work. And when you come from private sector and you go into that situation, I would not ever let go of those principles. However, you have to actually adjust. And in some ways that's good because it takes off a little bit of the pressure that you have in private sector, where if you don't keep going at that pace and you don't complete those things at that time, you're going to just be out of business. And at the same time, it becomes a little bit difficult sometimes because you have to let go of being attached to results and to the outcome. And you have to understand that you will get there. I mean, that is the part that I have learned. It might be a year or two later than what you anticipated, but you will get down that path. And that's also the times that you really start to learn, and as I said, paying attention in a different way. Because when these things get slowed down like this is when you start to learn about what's important to other people, what are the things that are important to them. And if you're about getting stakeholders on board, whether it's within your timing or not, you must pay attention to that. And so in some ways, we're lucky in the university setting because we actually have an opportunity to do that without being afraid of losing our business in the meantime. So you have to find a balance so that you actually feel like you're still moving forward and getting some things done, but yet you're taking the time to actually listen to what's important to the stakeholders. So that, because if they don't have buy-in, you're dead in the water anyway. It doesn't matter. It'll just fizzle right out. Okay. Tom, how has the rapid changes of leadership in the business development affected your ability to connect with the community? What do you think the future is for Antelope Valley? And how do we build stronger ties? So, what's that?
No, just
Not like a loaded question.
one question, Tom.
I expect this from him.
I know. So
I
do
expect this.
So
I
do
expect nothing less.
So do I.
This is why we have him in the room. Well, only one of the reasons, Thomas. No, I appreciate this because this is the truth, and this is something you guys have to understand. Okay, so when I came to work at BPA, we had Dean Emery. Like I told you, I'll be 3 years July 1. I'm on my third dean in 3 years right now. Okay, I actually had in a meeting someone say, "Oh, you're the problem," and I said, "Yeah, I'll own that." That's fine, I'll own it. Dean Emery, and if any of you have taken classes with him or knew him and Dr. Stark were both extremely committed to growing Antelope Valley and see the value in the market over here. Majority of faculty in the School of Business see it the same way. We had a leadership change last summer, and I'm not going to tell you that Garo Kafayan, who was our dean for 6 months, didn't care about AV, but what you got in a situation is that somebody can only take in so much information in a particular period of time. And in that period of time, I had been previously coming over here once a week, working on recruiting, building relationships with the community, particularly AVBOT, Antelope Valley Board of Trade. That is one of the, I think, the most important and strongest business organizations in this community because it provides a level playing field, and you don't have a lot of the competition that you have between the chambers of commerce here. There's about 6 different chambers of commerce here that all compete internally with each other. And so we had to make a decision, or I had to make the decision of where's the best place for me to put CSUB BPA so that we are actually being consistent. Because one of the most important things that you're trying to do when you build a region is consistency and doing what you say you're going to do and doing it well. And if you're not able to do that, being able to communicate that. And I will tell you that's always my goal, and I will tell you that we continue to fail at that miserably here. Okay? And it's not because we don't try, but it's because we don't have consistency. And what happened was that we were really on an uptick, and then our leadership changed, and it was very important for us to stay focused in Bakersfield, and then he gave me an initiative to actually put forth, which is the Student Professional Development Initiative that we've just gotten proof of concept of. And so guess what? My leader changed my direction. And the school was able to continue to commit to having Cindy come here every Tuesday as an advisor. And now we're in a situation where Dr. Stark is the interim dean, and guess what? My direction changes again. So you will actually, in fall, whether you like it or not, I'll be coming back over into Antelope Valley, and we're going to start really working strongly on growing this. And having Dr. Schultz be interim dean and him going for the permanent position, that doesn't mean he's going to get it, but advocate as much as you can because he has a connection to the area. The fact that Edwards Air Force Base is now talking to us, which we have been working on that back in the scenes for a long time. The fact that we have Mike Way now as the MBA director, that's also a person that's willing to get up and drive in his car and come over this way and do things like this. So now we're starting to pull the team and bring the team back together. But we will not be able to do this by ourselves. This is what we've got to look at, I believe, over here, are what are the advantages that we have. And I do believe that we should grow the program, but I also think one of the most important things about the advantage over here, as well as for Bakersfield, is that our program is not too large. And you all really have an opportunity to get to know each other. And you really have an opportunity to actually interact with your faculty. And I believe that if we just start to put a few resources to this, and we start to create some gathering points, some mixers, some other reasons to bring some people involved, and then I'm really going to look to you to bring in the community that you want to have here. Because you've got to take a certain level of ownership. In Bakersfield, I'm sorry to be directing this toward AV right now, but I got to give them this right now. This program will survive based on all of you. There is not going to be anyone from Bakersfield that is going to be able to ensure that this program stays alive. We can offer support, but you don't want us to do that anyway. Because all we're going to do is run over what you think is best in your community. So it is truly up to you to determine what level of leadership are you willing to bring in and what level of commitment are you willing to bring in. Because then as the School of Business, we can bring in and circle the wagons and bring in all that support. Okay? But it's not going to ever work out over here that all of that energy is going to be driven over from Bakersfield. Because it's not even possible. We can't own your community. That's the piece that you have to decide that education, and this is important to you, and this is the experience you've had, and as you are all, you're in an MBA because you've decided that you're going to be leaders. So step up. And it comes down to deciding what are the resources that we can provide to you. Yes, we're going to need to help give you bodies, and yes, we got to come up with some money. And then from there it becomes, how much of this do you want to own? How much of this do you find that you need, that you know that this community needs? And is it important to you to have a program? So we have to actually have a shared responsibility in this. Because I'm going to tell you what right now, it doesn't matter how many resources we bring in from Bakersfield, we will never do it right to the way that you want it to be because we're not here. So if that's the expectation, we will continue to fail at that. I can guarantee you that. But if we start to change that expectation a little bit, and yes, there has to be a commitment from the school, and I will tell you, School of Business has given a pretty dang good commitment. Now, we slowed down on advertising in that this year. And again, like I had talked to you about, there was a change in leadership, so there was a change in direction. And we had a little bit of a Chicken Little effect in the school because the school was out of some money in this. And so, Garo was at the place that he wasn't willing to spend anything on anything. So we had to slow everything down all the way across. Bakersfield, AV, that slowed down everywhere. But now we're back into a situation that we have an interim dean that actually knows the school, knows this community. He has taught here many, many, many times, and understands Bakersfield and believes in the market. And so we're going to continue to drive forward with that. We've got persons committed in the School of Business, meaning faculty, that are committed to doing this also. And then what we're going to need from you all is the commitment back. And I don't think the goal needs to be that this program is the same as Bakersfield. You know, you have your own reasons for being in an MBA and how you can actually support the community. So I think being similar is important, but then being able to determine what makes the niche for the folks in AV and what makes the niche for the folks in Bakersfield, and that's really where we have an opportunity to be more successful. Okay, we're at 10 to 1. What other questions do you have? Or is there anything in particular that you wanted me to address that I haven't? Bakersfield, are you still awake?
Oh, yeah.
You guys got any questions for me?
No, we're good.
We're good.
Okay. Tom, did I answer your question?
Absolutely, and I'm staying quiet because you know me, I will monopolize your time, right? And I will drive the discussion in the direction that I want, and I'm trying not to do that, so I'm just going to sit here.
All right, sit there. Does anybody else want to talk besides Tom? Are you guys really this shy?
You can say that.
Well,
Really?
Jacob's leaving. This is his last class.
Sorry. I think the biggest downfall that I've seen as far as recruitment of new MBA graduates is the lack of going to the aerospace industries out here, like Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Symbionics. I mean, there's probably 7 or 8 of them out here, and they're huge. I work for Northrop Grumman, and they're enormous. I mean, we're hiring 4,000 to 5,000 new employees in the next 2 years. They just got the long-range strike fighter contract, and everybody, I know a few guys right now that just went to Phoenix and stuff like that because they don't know that this is even here.
It's a huge problem for us, and it's a huge problem for us to get to your gatekeepers. That's what we need help with.
Are you calling me? I'll get you hold of somebody.
I want your number. Because and that's really what we need. And then I need actually for you to help facilitate that conversation. Like, you've got to help us open the doors because they have the defense companies. Sure, we can help and support them, but they don't need to do anything out of their way to help us. And they do not open their doors in terms of gatekeepers. That's where we need different people that actually work within those companies that can help facilitate and open the door and open that path for us to walk down. And then we have to have our act together enough that we do what we say we're going to do when we're going to do it. But those are the types of things, Jacob, that we need. That's when I say to you, be the leader that you want to be. That's you showing me leadership right now.
Well, that's the biggest thing, too, is that they don't ask. Because, like, in this class right now, I work for Northrop, but you previously worked for Edwards Air Force Base as a DoD civilian. But Tom's a DoD civilian. Julia works at Edwards Air Force Base. Valerie works at Edwards Air Force Base.
So what does it take? So what does it take? Okay, so then my question becomes, what does it take that we have to do that we get you guys to be engaged enough that you actually help us make these relationships, and we're not standing here by ourselves going, help me get to know you, we have this program. That's the part. How do I keep you engaged enough that you're willing to actually utilize your connections where you are?
Well, it's who do we tell that these things? Like, we were kind of sitting here like, oh yeah, they should be doing this, but it's like, what are we supposed to do to tell, who do we tell that, oh, you need to come to this job fair, and show up at Northrop, and those type of things,
Yes.
Angel, can I jump in for 1 second?
Yep.
Bakersfield is like thinning. Bakersfield, can you guys see me?
Yes.
If you don't have any more questions for Angel, like I said earlier and in our meeting earlier this week, class party the week after finals. I will email you about it. So this is not goodbye just yet. And if you need me for anything in the meantime, Tawana, call me Sunday or beginning of next week about the LinkedIn changes. We can go over them in 5 minutes on the phone, okay?
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Great. I'm not going to say goodbye yet. I'm just going to say see you guys in a week and a half, okay?
So is with Hunter, and somebody's going to pick it from there, or
What's that?
The library.
library access?
Yeah, library upstairs for the SOSIs. Thanks, MG. I'll talk to you in the next couple days, okay?
Sure, thanks.
Okay.
You know what? Okay. So now that we're back
Hang on
to
1
the
second.
call.
That's okay.
I want to
So
open this door because we should be having NBA people.
I'm going to transition here.
Come on in.
I'm going to transition here and stop recording. Like, Angel, your talk portion is over.
Yeah.
Your AV program portion starts now, okay? And I know Mike wanted to say a few things too.